Welcome back to the Caregivers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Ropoleski, and you can call me Dr. Mark. Today, we're talking about one of the hardest emotions for caregivers to admit, resentment. Not just anger, not just guilt, not just exhaustion, resentment. The feeling that builds when you've been carrying too much for too long with too little help. The feeling that says, I love this person, and I resent what this is doing to me. For many caregivers, that sentence feels almost impossible to say out loud. They worry it means that they're selfish, ungrateful, or failing the person they love. But resentment is not always a moral failure. Sometimes it's a signal. It may be telling us that the caregiver is isolated, unsupported, grieving, overwhelmed, and being asked to carry something no one person was meant to carry alone. Our guest today is Elaine K. Sanchez. Elaine is the founder of caregiverhelp.com, a caregiver speaker, and the author of Letters from Madelyn, Chronicles of a Caregiver. She's spent decades helping caregivers name and work through the emotions that caregiving cultures often tell them to hide. Elaine, welcome to the Caregivers podcast. And before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe or follow the Caregivers podcast wherever you're listening. It's completely free, and it's one of the best ways to support the show and keep it around and help these conversations reach more caregivers who really need them. Elaine Sanchez, welcome to the Caregivers podcast. We're so happy you're here to join us today.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. I love your podcast, and I'm honored to be a guest.
Well, in the tradition of the podcast, we're going to jump right in and tell me, Elaine, why is resentment probably the emotion caregivers are most afraid to say out loud?
Well, I think we always want to be loving, kind, patient. We understand that our care receiver can't help what's happened to them, whether it's through a physical injury or it's a disease like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. They can't help it. And we're healthy and they're not. So we want to be this perfect, loving caregiver, but we're human. And you get to the point that you resent not having any time to yourself, and that you always have to put them and their needs ahead of your own. I don't think it's at all unusual for people to resent how much time it takes, how much money it costs, the freedom that they have lost to pursue their own interests, to travel, to be with friends, to do the things that bring them pleasure. And you can't be human and not have some of these feelings.
But when we talk about resentment and caregiving,
Mm-hmm.
what are we really talking about? I mean, how is that different from anger in the moment or, fleeting frustration that passes?
In most caregiving situations, it's a long journey, and you don't have an end date to it. So you are looking at your life and your own aging progression, and you may realize at some point that by the time your care receiver passes, and I know this sounds harsh, that you may not have much life left. And I think when we give everything we have to someone else at our own expense, resentment is inevitable.
We hear those statistics about 30% of caregivers dying before the care recipient.
Sure.
Do you think
Sure.
resentment that's unresolved accelerates that?
I'm not a statistician. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you from what I have seen that I think it is one of the factors. I think that it's that carrying that kind of heavy emotion impacts our bodies and our brains. And when you're feeling that kind of resentment, are you taking care of yourself? Are you getting the exercise that you need? Are you eating appropriate foods? Are you getting the breaks? And if you don't, I think that, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I think that doing all of those things cascade into a series of other physical and emotional complications.
Resentment cascade. I like that concept.
Yeah.
Maybe that is the final sort of straw that just causes what you've assembled in terms of your own ability to self-care to just sort of start crumbling once
It
that
could.
really entrenches.
It could. I think resentment and guilt are two very well, there are a lot of damaging emotions, but those are two big ones. And I think, Dr. Mark, that a lot of times people feel this resentment and then they feel guilty about it. And then they just go back and forth that they want to be a good caregiver. They want to be loving. They want to do this as an act of love. And it's just hard because you can't control another person's behavior and you can't control the progression of the disease. And it's hard.
I can see in the setting of those odds, it could even trigger a sense of panic or complete
Sure.
loss of agency. So, Elaine, why does this caregiver resentment often feel so much bigger than the moment that actually triggers it? I mean, a glass spilling or medications being refused or the
Yeah.
same question asked maybe 10 times, but suddenly the caregiver just explodes. Is that because the reaction is not about that one moment, but actually
Oh, of
about the
course.
months and years that have piled up with just too
Yes,
much responsibility with no relief?
absolutely. You nailed it. It's just the monotony and the repetitiveness and the sameness of every single day until there's a crisis. And then you have, you know, something big to respond to. But most of the time, I think most days for most caregivers is just a rinse and repeat cycle. It's the same thing. And people get lonely, they become isolated, they don't find the time or the energy to take care of themselves. And when that happens, then of course they're going to explode because maybe they've already done 4 loads of sheets today. They've taken out a basket full of Depends. Who knows? They've answered the same question 30 times in the last 30 minutes. So of course they get upset and frustrated, and that leads to resentment, and that leads to the cork coming off and you blowing up. And who could blame them?
So, when resentment's suppressed, where does
Mm.
suppressed resentment go if the caregiver can't even speak and tell the truth about it?
Where does it go? That's a really good question. I think I don't have a clinical answer for that. I think it just builds. What I see is kind of like a pyramid. You have this kind of foundation, the base of the frustration and the feeling of entrapment and the feeling of monotony and isolation, and then one thing on top of another. And, if someone is taking care of a loved one who has Alzheimer's and you get to the late afternoon and the caregiver is exhausted, and then all of a sudden the care receiver starts displaying sundowning behaviors, it's going to blow unless they learn some strategies for de-escalating or not increasing the cortisol in the person with dementia during the day. Of course you're going to blow
It
unless you
doesn't
don't have any unless you don't have any sense of self left at all. I don't People need tools to do this. And they need help. They need support. They need to know that they're not alone. And I believe it's really important for caregivers to know that all of these negative feelings don't make them a bad person. It makes them human. And the feelings are going to come. It's what you do with them that's going to make a difference in how you feel about yourself and your care receiver.
Well, at the same time, though, can a caregiver deeply love someone and still resent caring for them?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that most caregivers do. Um, you know, I know you talk about people who care for people who never cared for them, like parents, right? And you can have a troubled marriage and really resent them. Um, but you can also resent a person for getting old, for becoming incapacitated, for all of the things that are lost to you that you used to be able to do, for the person they used to be, for the way you used to partner with them, and then they're no longer capable of that. I had one friend, a caregiver, who said, "I feel like I'm operating two nervous systems. I have to do everything to take care of him. I have to do every single thing for him, from everything that he drinks to what he eats, to what he wears, to, getting him up and out of a chair, getting him to sit down on the toilet. I have to do all of that for him, and I have to do everything to take care of myself." So when you think of it in those terms, and you do that for years, how do you not feel resentful?
Certainly not without a need of some sort of outlet. It almost sounds like you don't
Exactly.
resent the person, you resent the situation that you're forced
Exactly.
to experience that person in,
Yes.
whether it's because of systematic issues or whether it's progressive decline due to chronic
Yes.
disease. And that's, I guess, part of the more complex mourning process that is
Of
involved in all of
course.
this, even
Absolutely.
predeceasement.
I think you really got that and understand that this is as much of as resentment, it's a part of the grieving process before a loved one dies. And it's that grief that, of losing them inch by inch, day by day.
You've spoken with a lot of people over the years. What happens when caregivers believe that if they love someone enough, they should not resent what caregiving is doing to their life?
I don't know that everybody admits it, but I would be willing to bet a substantial amount of money that every caregiver feels it. And it would be in varying degrees that, um, and so much of it would depend upon the relationship with you that you had with them before they became your care receiver. It's easier to resent someone who was never good to you, like a parent who was abusive or neglectful. I'd resent the heck out of them. But when you've been with somebody, whether it's a good parent or a good spouse, and you've had a good life together, I think, again, I'm not a doctor, but I think they tend to resent the situation more than the person.
Well, that makes sense. When caregivers say, I know it's not their fault, I know they can't help it, I
Hmm.
love
Hmm.
them, but I still resent what my life has become.
Yeah.
What are they trying to reconcile in themselves?
I don't know, Dr. Mark. I think sometimes just the act of saying it
And hearing it with your
and
ears as it's
hearing
coming out,
it.
and it's almost like an honest admission.
Yes, it is an honest admission. And if they can say that in a safe place, they're going to see every other caregiver that's going to go, "Yeah, you know, I know." And, it isn't reasonable to expect people to not feel resentment. But I think if they can be in a safe place with people who are not going to judge them, um, and they know that they're not alone and that having these feelings is normal, then I think it's easier.
Easier in community, for sure.
It is. It is. And that's one of the things that so many caregivers live in isolation. And they don't want to say, um, one time my mother got so angry at my dad. She said, "If you do that again, I am going to take a belt to you." And then she wrote to me and she said, "I've never heard him. I, and I never want to, but last night I felt like it." And I think the act of writing that in a letter to me um, helped her release some of that anger because she acknowledged it. And she owned it, that that was how she was feeling. And when other caregivers hear that, they're like, wow, she had the courage to say what I've only thought. And then I think I'm a really bad person for thinking this.
Well, it might actually just open the exit of the heart, so to speak, to let those emotions actually pass through you. You can't
I
get rid of
like
them,
that.
and you can suppress them, and they just keep
Yeah,
swirling inside of you. But
yeah,
if
yeah,
if that outlet allows them to pass through you finally, and this
yeah,
is inspired by some of the work of people like Michael Singer, who's really
yeah,
influential in sort of keeping that open heart flow concept. But I think caregiving communities probably facilitate that process, or as you mentioned, the interaction with you with the letter and some
right.
means to express it.
I
Um,
really like that statement, opens the exit to the heart or from the heart. What did you say? Opens the
exit from the heart. Yeah.
exit from the heart, that you take this really hard feeling and you just let it out. That's beautiful.
Well, that's what I
Um,
got from, among many things, from
yeah.
reading Michael Singer's books, for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes caregivers just feel a flash of relief when the person they care for goes into the hospital, enters long-term care,
Yes.
or actually even finally sleeps a night.
Yes.
Others even feel relief after a person passes
Yes.
and then feel so guilty for feeling that.
Yes.
But what does relief actually mean?
I think it means freedom for a little bit. I think it means you will have a little time to rest, to sleep, to recover. My experience with most caregivers who have been taking care of someone for a very long time, when they die, it's like, you know, I'm relieved. I don't feel sadness. I feel relieved. And then about 6 months down the road, when the reality hits them that they're really gone, then all of the things, this was in my mother's case, when my dad died, I said, "Mom, please get involved in the hospice grief counseling program at your
Hmm.
church." And her response was, "Oh, hell, I've been grieving for 7 years. I am done with that. I don't need that." Um, and then she told me that she started waking up in the morning and feeling the weight and the warmth of his body next to her in bed. And and I said, "How does that feel?" And she said, "Well, it's comforting." And I said, "You know what I mean? It's a little spooky." And then she started just reliving every moment that she had not been as saintly or as kind or as patient as she wanted to be. And she was beating herself up with guilt. And again, I said, "Please get in the hospice grief counseling program." And she did. And the thing that helped her is that she was able to meet with other people. She was able to talk openly and honestly about not being a saint, and about not being a perfect caregiver, about really feeling relief and gladness when he died. And it wasn't because she didn't love him, it was just because she had reached the end. And, um, as you said, 30% of caregivers die before the care receiver. And that's why, especially when you're looking at older caregivers that have their own health care issues that they don't take care of, that they put on hold so they can take care of their care receiver. You've seen that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When resentment shows up in a caregiver and we actually view it as data instead of a character
Ah.
flaw, what is it measuring?
Mm, yeah. That's a great question. And I think that's a great question to ask all caregivers. If this is data and not just feeling, then what is contributing? I'm a big advocate of writing things down. You know, uh, what becoming aware, what are the things that are making you feel frustrated? And then naming them. You can do this a lot of ways. You can talk about it, you can think about it, but writing it down really helps you look at it. And then it helps you to look at it as data. Okay. So I resent that I can't, that I've had to drop out of a lot of the social circles that I used to belong to. I resent that um, I can't just go for a walk with a friend or pick up the phone and say, "Hey, would you like to go get a cup of coffee? Or could we go see a movie? Or would you like to come over for dinner?" I resent that our life that was once like this is now like this, and that I don't have a lot of options left to me. I resent that I can't afford long term care, and that I'm the one that's going to be stuck doing this, probably for the rest of my life. So when you look at the data, if you get people to list the things that are making them feel angry, resentful, frustrated, all of these things, and writing it down, I think, first of all, the act of writing it down is very cathartic. And then you can say, okay, now what do I want to do with this information? What do I do with it?
What happens then to a caregiver when the person they're caregiving for becomes the center of everybody else's concern, but they
Oh,
almost
yeah.
become invisible in the face of the caregiver's suffering because they're still the ones who function at such a high level?
Of course, of course. I I went into a store several years ago and I saw a woman who's been taking care of her husband for years. He has MS and he's in a wheelchair. And we just chit chatted, and I told her what I did and that I helped caregivers manage the emotional stress of caregiving. And she said, "Well, yeah, I guess I will be a caregiver one of these days." And I said, "For crying out loud, you've been a caregiver for years." And she said, "Well, thank you." I said, "Taking care of Mark is not easy. And you have to meet all of his needs before you even think about yours." And she said, "Well, thank you for noticing. Everybody says, poor Mark, poor Mark, poor Mark, but nobody ever asks about me, about how I feel." And I think that is a source of resentment that, people will say you're a saint. And one woman in one of my support groups says, "I am not a saint, and it makes me angry when people say that I am because I don't feel like a saint. The feelings that I have are not saintly." So I really think it's important to acknowledge caregivers and to say, "You are carrying a heavy load. I know this is hard." Um, and I suggest that caregivers go around with a list in their pocket because people will always say, "Well, can I do anything to help? If I can help, give me a call." And it's like, "Well, here's my list, and I've got a bunch of things written down on it. And if you want to take any of these, just let me know, and I would be really appreciative." Most, a lot of
Yeah,
people will
absolutely.
disappear, and some people will actually step up and help.
Or that classic line, you should really come over for supper one time, as
Yeah.
opposed to, I'm inviting you next week. When are you
Yes,
free?
yes, yeah, yeah. And you could say, "Oh gosh, that would be great. What night works for you?" Most of us don't have the courage to do that.
Oh, it does take courage or determination, at least.
Yeah.
Elaine, do caregivers ever become resentful of themselves? Not just for what caregiving has taken from them, but for what they feel caregiving has turned them into?
Oh, that's an interesting thing. Do they become resentful of themselves? Now, I
Almost
am
like they let themselves become that way, and then they have this moment where, can't believe I become this way. I can't believe I've
sure,
turned into this. Like, is there it's almost like an auto resentment that's a bit different from resentment of external forces.
sure, because we want to be kind and loving. And then when we snap, then we feel guilty and we feel sorry and we feel sad. And we know that we've wounded our care receiver with sharp words. So I don't know if we resent ourselves as much as we feel guilty. And I think that that is a really detrimental feeling. And I know that you've talked about setting boundaries on this show a lot. And I think that's one of the most important things that caregivers need to do. Um, and they need to put it in I terms, I, not you. And so when I have I had a situation with a dear friend whose husband was dying. They knew he was dying. They knew there was nothing left that they could do for him. His heart was failing. He had had all of the surgeries that he could have. And so she was caring for him at home because he refused to go into assisted living or any kind of long-term care. And so she called me and she was so exhausted. And she said, what can I do? And I said, well, can you hire some non medical personnel to come in? And if he doesn't sleep at night, have them stay with him at night and then you sleep during the day. And she says, he doesn't want any strangers coming into the house. And I said, well, do you have any children or any friends that would come over? Well, no, that wasn't a solution. So I suggested, I said, tell him that you love him, but you have to have some help and you have to be able to sleep at night. And so you need to be able to hire somebody to come in and give you a break. And his response was, well, I'm going to die pretty soon. So you know what? You can sleep when I'm dead. And she brought it up to him again, and he just said, well, I am sorry I am such a burden to you. And so she called me again, and I said, you just need to be a little bit firmer. And she blew me away because she went back into his bedroom and she said, okay, darling, here's the deal. If you won't let me hire somebody to come in, you're going to have to move out. And he said, what do you mean move out? She said, I can't do this without help. And so you have said nobody can come into the house. So I am going to go start calling some skilled nursing facilities and we're just going to have to move you out. Well, then he was willing to um, let her hire some help to come in. And I think that for caregivers, so you asked earlier, do they resent themselves? And I would say that the times that caregivers get really angry with themselves is sometimes when they are a doormat for other people. And then they think, I should stand up to them. I should have the courage to say what I need. And and I should follow through with it. So setting boundaries, I think that's a really good place to start.
You hear these days about the term setting boundaries, and it pops up on the grid in a lot of circumstances, not
Sure.
just caregiving. And some people say it's maybe even gone too far that everybody's setting a boundary. But we have this natural tendency to set boundaries or think about setting boundaries with the outside forces, the outside individuals,
Yes.
but maybe boundaries within ourselves
Mm-hmm.
when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to caregiving
Mm-hmm.
and guilt
Mm-hmm.
and resentment.
Mm-hmm.
But having that
Mm-hmm.
skill set to say, I'm holding myself to this boundary,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't involve anybody else, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
involve the system or the person I'm caring
Mm-hmm.
for, but involves me.
Mm-hmm.
That might actually be the skill that needs to be developed, the
I
self
think
boundary.
so. And it's hard for people who are caregivers, who are naturally empathetic. And you've talked about this on some of your other shows, um, to put themselves first. And setting a boundary really requires that you do that. And, a lot of people talk about I statements, and I really embrace that. And it would be, I can't do that. I'm not willing to do that. I understand that this is going to upset you, but I need to do this for myself. And then, if they keep pushing, which people who are, um, if you're in a codependent relationship, people are really good at making you feel guilty and doing what you don't want to do because you need to please them, right? Um, then after a certain point, you said, I said no. I mean no. Um, I'm not going to change my mind, so stop. And then at some point, you can just walk out. I'm done talking about this, and you just walk out. It's like my friend did with her husband. It's like, you're going to have to move out. And he knew. I mean, they had been married over 50 years, and this was the first time she had ever stood up to him and got his attention. And she got the help she needed.
Pretty courageous moment. And I don't see lack of love popping up
No,
in that circumstance. Just
no.
some courage.
Yeah, just courage. And it does take courage. You're right. It does take courage to say no to a person who needs a lot of help. And it doesn't mean that you are abandoning them. It just means that you are not willing to give up your entire self to take care of them. And that, I know it sounds selfish, um, but I always say self care is not selfish. If you run yourself into the ground physically, emotionally, mentally, and if you can no longer do this, then somebody else is going to have to step in. And who might that be? Who's going to take care of them if you die, right?
And obviously, there are lots of different resources, some which are economically sensitive, and we need to be
Yes.
mindful of that. But
Yes.
there's also community in different forms that's free, and every little bit helps.
It does.
Switching gears a little bit, many caregivers tell us that their deepest resentment is actually not towards the person who's receiving care, but it's towards the siblings.
I know what's coming.
Yeah, it's the siblings and family members who left them to carry the burden alone. Why does that resentment become so intense and so hard to let go of?
Because it's so unfair. And, you think we were all raised in the same house. We have the same DNA. Why don't why don't they see it the way I do? I've known two families. I heard you talk on another show about, some families that work together. I started my caregiving journey in 1993, and I have known two families in which all of the siblings contributed equally. They all agreed, they all helped during the long illnesses of their parents, and there were no fights at the end. I think that's very, very unusual. And the truth is, we're all born as individuals, and the people we marry, where we live, the work we do, our education, our social circles, we end up being very, very different with our just lived experience. There are so many times, and I had it in my own family, that one person steps up and the person who should be, maybe the person who is nearest or the person who has the most time and availability, does not. And so I encourage people to write a letter and to hold them accountable and to just say, this is what I see. And this is how your actions or inactions are affecting mom or dad or both of them. And this is what I would like for you to do to fix it. Now, a lot of times that doesn't fix anything, except it takes this load off of your heart and out of your mind. It puts it on paper, it puts them on notice. And surprisingly, it did make a difference in our family. So I didn't, and I think when you write a letter and you hold people accountable, you can't expect change. Maybe it will happen. But more than anything, it just takes that burden and that resentment out of your own heart, and you give it the exit.
Right.
You take it out of your heart and you put it over here, and then you can go on about
This
your
is for
business.
you. Yep.
Yes, this is for you. Yeah, yeah,
This is for you to share.
yeah. And to have and to hold until you decide to change.
There's so many dynamics of caregiving that can fuel resentment, but I think there's one that's really important that we touch on. And how much do you think caregiver resentment actually comes from being handed a responsibility for someone's safety and survival and dignity without actually having the training, support, or protection that that responsibility requires?
That's a big one because most people who take this on have very busy, full lives before they take on the responsibility of caregiving. And how do you do that? This comes back to me thinking about the preemptive issues, and having conversations with your aging parents, even if they are in great health. And I am such a strong advocate of talking um, talking to your spouse, talking to your parents, and saying, if you should become incapacitated, how do you want to be cared for? Who do you want to do this? How will it be paid for? And I went through this with my parents. My dad lived until 1997, and my mom died in 2002. And so I went through this with them, and then I cared for my Aunt Jean, my mother's only sister, for 10 years. And these were very busy times in my life. I was a single mom with three teenage kids when my dad had this stroke. And then I was, I was still at a very busy point in my life when I was taking care of Aunt Jean. So how do you fit this in? And I I'm just a really strong advocate of talking to them. And I think for each one of us, when we are healthy and we have the capacity, we should be getting our end of life ducks in a row. And I have a disability instructions that are 10 pages long that tell my kids, you know, everything from the fact that I don't want to live with any of them. That if I need to go into long-term care, if I need to be in a memory care unit, I will be an escape risk. And so put me someplace where I can walk, where I can get outside in nature. I don't want to listen to certain television. I don't want the TV on all day long. So I have put, and my husband have put, very, very specific instructions on how we want to be cared for. We have long-term care insurance policies. So we've said, this is, here's the money, here's how we're going to be cared for. And a lot of families don't have the assets for that, but they need to think about that. If if I expected my child to take care of me, and if that child isn't going to be able to work any longer to take care of me, then how am I going to provide for their financial safety? Because I don't think any of us want our kids to end up losing their careers, their
Go,
own savings, their own
going
life to
bankrupt.
take care of us. Yeah, we don't want that to happen to them. And I think it starts with us. It starts with those of us who are probably going to need care someday.
I think it's really summed up in this way, in that resentment is really not a dark feeling, but it may just be measuring grief, inequity, isolation, unsupported labor,
Yes. Yes. I've never put it
especially
that way before, but that's great. Yeah.
offloaded
Yeah.
by the system. A lot of people
Yes.
are very unprepared to take someone home and become a caregiver overnight
Yes.
without instruction, without basic understanding of how to move people, without injuring themselves. But
Right.
furthermore, the loss of self, or just that anger at a system that left the caregiver
Yes.
alone way too much.
Yes. And you say, you take them home and you have to learn how to care for them. And that's the easy part, because you can give very explicit instructions on how you can lift someone without injuring your own back. And I've had friends who have had to do the dialysis at home. And as frightening as it was, they learned how to do those tasks. And those are hard tasks, but we give more attention to the physical aspects of caregiving to the caregiver than we do to their own emotional well-being. And it's it's unfortunate in the U.S. A lot of millions of people lost access to caregiver support in 2025 when area agencies on aging lost their funding for caregiver support, and a lot of employee resource programs were downsized or eliminated. And so we have millions of people who are still working, and they're raising children and they're caring for aging parents or a sick spouse or a disabled child. So, the work that we're doing to try to support caregivers and hold them up and give them validation and community and support, I think is really, really important.
I couldn't agree more. In your experience, Elaine, when does a resenting caregiver actually become dangerous, either
Oh,
to themselves or to the person receiving care? Like, is there a
yeah,
point of no return?
I'm sure there is. I've not been there. My mother got close, but she didn't get there. Um, I think it's what you said. It's data, and we have to be aware. If we think we're getting close to that, it's safer to walk out of the house, to call a crisis line, to call a friend, to call a child, to say, I'm afraid I might hurt her, or I'm afraid I might hurt him.
Or
That,
myself?
or myself. Yes, I grew up in a farm community in Kansas, and there was um, a couple that she had had a lot of surgeries and a lot of illness, and she had just been diagnosed with something, and he had an issue, and he just went into the garage and turned down the car and put the hose into the house and killed them both and the dog. That was such a shock in our community, and this was probably 30, 40 years ago, but it stays with you because I think people do get to the point where they think, I cannot handle one more crisis, and I can't, I'm not going to be able to take care of her if I can't take care of myself. And so part of that is knowing when you're getting there because it's understandable, but it's tragic. It's really tragic.
So, when a caregiver then first notices that resentment's starting to build, what's the first question they should ask themselves?
What is it? What are the people, the situations, the events, what's going on right now that's making me feel resentful? That's the first step. And then the second step is to look at it. The second step is acceptance. And this is the hardest step because this is where you say, okay, um, do I have any influence, authority, or control over this situation? Is there anything I can do to make it better or to make it go away? And then the third step is you take action. So if there's nothing that can be done, then do you obsess over it? Let it be the first thing that wakes you up every morning, the last thing you think about at night, the thing that wakes you up at 3 a.m.? Or do you find a way to release your emotional attachment to it? So those are the three steps: awareness, acceptance, and action. And then if you are in that place where you know that you could be a danger to yourself or someone else, then you need to pick up the phone and call a crisis line, or you need to call a friend, or you need to call 911 even if you feel like you are really in danger of hurting yourself or hurting them, and you need to reach out for help. In moments when I have felt very frustrated, isolated, alone, I find a way to get out of the house, even if it's only going for, a couple walks around the block, because this is a minor frustration, right? Or a minor resentment. Just get out of the house, get in nature, get some fresh air, separate yourself. But if it's really a crisis, then you need crisis intervention.
So then how does a caregiver make room for resentment without letting the resentment steamroll forward and take over their life?
Yeah. I think that's what I would suggest. You follow those 3 steps. You write it down. You look at it. Can I change it? Can I fix it? Can I make it any better? And then what can I do? And when you look at resentment, Dr. Mark, what do you think are the action steps that a person should take?
Well, I think acknowledging
Yeah,
that it's not something intrinsic to them that they're pulling out as a character trait. It's something that's been
right.
conditioned by a series of events, which they feel very often powerless or exhausted
Yes,
to deal with.
yes,
And that's
yes,
often in the face of dedication, love, and effort. So I
yes,
think, to your point, I think we need to acknowledge the humanness of that
yes,
emotion, and
yes.
that it's conditioned on a series of events, some which are in our control, and that could be our boundaries
Mhm.
and our decisions and our actions, but a lot of things that are outside of our control, compounded by grief and mourning
Yeah.
loss of self, relationship with the person we're caring for, and relationship with the outside world and things that were
Mhm.
important to us. I think recognizing, as we've spoken, that this is a very human, natural response. It's not unloving.
Yes.
It's
Right.
it's it's human, and perhaps there are superhumans out there who can avoid this completely. But those who avoid it best, I suspect, have some pretty good strategies. We touched on,
Yes.
in the moment, letting things flow and exit you so you don't carry them consistently.
Yes.
You said going outside, even for a walk. I think back to Kate Washington when she joined us. She said she'd sit in her car and scream. Even that helped.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Deep breathing is great, and that's something you can do without leaving the house. You can just go around the corner and breathe in deeply and hold it, and then blow it out through your mouth. And if you feel like you're going to explode, that um, even just doing that, just walking into another room, doing a deep breathing exercise will give you, oxygenate your blood and give you time to think about how you want to react before you just explode.
so that's a really important point, that sometimes you just can't exit the situation in the moment,
Yeah.
but maybe you can approach it differently
Yeah.
and process it differently. So can you tell me a little bit about a term you've coined called creative indifference?
It wasn't my term.
Okay.
It was, I think my mother borrowed it someplace else,
Okay.
but it was her
Something you adopted.
method.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something that we adopted. And she wrote letters to me during the nearly 7 years that she cared for my dad after his stroke. And this was this was in 1993, so it was before uh, there was the internet or email or affordable calling plans. And she was very hard of hearing, had very poor health. So the way that she managed her stress was to go to her word processor at that time, and it was just stream of consciousness writing. And so she would write about everything that she was feeling and exactly how she felt about it. And she got really mad. She was a devotee of self help books, and she got really mad when she read Dr. Wayne Dyer's book, Your Erroneous Zones. And she got mad at that because she said he was telling everybody that they should just do what they want to do. And she said, as an old lady, I can tell you that life is not doing what you want to do. And so she went on to talk about um, the monotony of her life. And she said, I get up in the morning, I fix breakfast, I do the dishes, I start a load of laundry, I clean the house, I help your father, I go back, I fix lunch, I do the dishes, I do more laundry, more housework, more helping your father. And she said, for me, an exciting day might consist of having an interesting telephone conversation or possibly meeting somebody I know on the street. And she said, and for this, I should take vitamins. I should eat right and exercise so I can prolong this wonderful life experience. And she said, no, no. And then this is where it came from. She said, my joy in life comes from living and growing mentally and spiritually. And the thing that I've learned about having my own happiness from within is that I can stay more or less detached and still do what has to be done to give other people a reasonable amount of happiness. And so she called it a detached attitude for years. And this is not feeling cold, it's not being indifferent. It just means that you observe what's happening and you respond to what needs to be done, but you detach yourself emotionally to the feeling associated with it. And that's where the three steps came in because she never said the three steps, but as I was reading her letters, I thought she does the same thing every single time. When she's upset with someone or something, she sits down and she writes about it and she just lets it flow. And then she will say something like, well, this isn't the life either one of us would have chosen. This is not what we planned for, but it is the way that it is. And so I accept it. And then the action for her, she had several methods of action. She learned to meditate. She listened to Deepak Chopra tapes. She learned to Reiki. She had and she wrote letters. She wrote really long, long letters. And that was her exit from the heart, all of these things that were happening. So I saw, as I was editing those letters, that she had this three-step process. And so I looked at every one of those things and was like, okay, this is what she did over and over and over again. And that helped her maintain her emotional equilibrium as she was living isolated out on a farm, 6 miles from a town of 10,000 people. She had to drop out of her volunteer groups, no neighbors to talk to. And this is how she managed it. And she did it with such humor and grace. And I think we can all do that. It's something that doesn't cost money. It's just a matter of recognizing it, becoming aware of it, accepting what you can't change, and then taking action to do what can be changed. Sort of like the serenity prayer.
Does resentment, once it's there, ever truly go away? I mean, Elaine, some caregivers expect resentment to disappear when caregiving ends or when the person they've cared for passes. But what happens when caregiving is over, but the resentment's still there?
Well, that's when I think that it would make sense to seek professional counseling. Um, because if this is in their heart and it's weighing them down, the likelihood of them being able to go forward and have happiness and having a peaceful existence probably isn't very good. And I think there are professional counselors, and it could be grief counseling, or it could, groups. There are free ones, and then there's one-on-one. Um, but I think acknowledging it and saying, I need help to get over this because I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling angry and resentful and cheated. And somehow they need help um, recognizing the incredible gift that they gave caring for another person and congratulate themselves for finding the heart and the energy and the love to do that. Um, and then I think they need to learn to love themselves and appreciate the things that they did right. And that's not typical of caregivers because usually what they do is they go through and they think of all of the times that they weren't perfect and they beat themselves up for that. So if they can't get there on themselves, I really recommend getting some professional help.
So, Elaine, what would you say to the caregiver tonight who's going to be listening at 2 a.m., who loves deeply, feels exhausted, feels resentful, and is wondering what kind of person that makes them?
I would say you are not a bad person. This is a normal response to a difficult situation. Give yourself credit for all of the good, kind, and generous things you do. Look in the mirror and think, what if somebody was doing these things for you? How would you feel? And I think they would probably feel grateful. So they need to recognize how hard this is, how much they're giving. I would say take care of yourself, take a break, get somebody that you can talk to, that you can share this with. Carrying this load by yourself is just, it's not impossible, but it is really incredibly hard. So just honor your love, the time, the attention, um, all that you do for them, even if they can't honor it or appreciate it, and nobody else does either, you do that for yourself.
That
What
wraps
do
up
you have
this week.
to add to that?
That wraps up this week's episode of the Caregivers podcast. I couldn't think of a better ending.
Okay.
It's to the point, it's personal, it's human,
Yeah.
it's loving, it's compassionate, and it shows grace. We'll see you
Yes.
again next week.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Mark.
Elaine, thank you for helping us name an emotion that so many caregivers carry, but so few feel safe enough to say out loud. I think one of the most important reminders from this conversation is that resentment does not mean a caregiver does not love. It means they've been loving under conditions that are just too heavy, too lonely, and too unsupported for too long. For anyone listening who's felt and wondered what it says about you, I hope this conversation helped you hear something different. You're not a bad person because resentment showed up. You're a human being under strain, and that feeling deserves to be listened to before it turns into something heavier. And before you go, please subscribe or follow the Caregivers podcast wherever you're listening or watching. It's free, it helps support the show, and it helps these conversations reach more caregivers who may be feeling alone in something they have never known how to name. We'll see you again next week. Before we wrap up, I wanted to remind you of something important. The conversations you hear on this podcast are here to inform, to support, to spark reflection. They're not a substitute for professional medical advice, care, therapy, or crisis services. Listening to this podcast does not create a doctor-patient or caregiver-client relationship between us. If you're facing a medical concern, health challenge, a mental health challenge, or a caregiving situation that needs guidance, I encourage you to reach out to a qualified professional who knows your story. If you're ever in crisis, please don't wait. Call your local emergency number or recognize crisis hotline right away. You deserve real-time help and support. The views you hear on this show, whether from me or my guests, are our own. They don't necessarily reflect any organizations we work with or are part of or have worked with or been part of in the past. This podcast is an independent production. It's not tied to any hospital, university, or healthcare system. Thank you for being here, for listening, and most of all, for taking the time to care for yourself while you continue to care for others. I look forward to hearing from you.